I wake up to the gentle hum of the city, the soft rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains of our bedroom. The scent of fresh coffee wafts in from the kitchen, a familiar and comforting aroma that sets the tone for another busy day. As I roll over and glance at the clock, I see it's just past 6. Mornings in our household are a ritual, and I cherish these moments of tranquility before the world demands my attention. Megan is already up, her silhouette visible in the kitchen as she moves gracefully. Preparing breakfast, she's a vision of dedication, balancing her career with our life together. She works as a marketing executive, her job demanding creativity and strategic thinking, much like mine. Yet, there's a warmth to her that makes our home feel like a sanctuary. I love watching her in these moments, her focus evident as she flips pancakes with an ease that suggests she's done this 1,000 times before. The laughter of our 2 children echoes from the other room, Sarah, our 10-year-old, and little Ethan, who's just 6. Their playful banter adds a layer of joy to the morning, a symphony of innocence that never fails to make me smile. After a quick shower, I join them at the breakfast table, the air filled with the chatter of my family. Megan sets down a plate of fluffy pancakes, adorned with fresh strawberries and a drizzle of maple syrup. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she greets me with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling with affection. I can't help but return the gesture, feeling a rush of love for the woman who's been my partner in all things for nearly 12 years. We share a connection that's both deep and effortless, a testament to our commitment and understanding of each other. As we eat, I listen to Sarah recounting her latest adventures at school, how she bravely stood up to a bully in her class and how her teacher praised her for her courage. Little Ethan, always eager to contribute, chimes in with his tales of playground escapades, each story more exaggerated than the last. I watch Megan's face light up with pride as she encourages them, her laughter mingling with theirs, creating a perfect harmony that fills the room with warmth. After breakfast, we gather our things for the day. Megan kisses the children goodbye, her hugs lingering a moment longer as if she's trying to infuse them with all her love and encouragement. I step into my polished shoes and grab my briefcase, ready to dive into another hectic day at the law firm. My job as a corporate lawyer demands precision, strategic thinking, and a level of dedication that often sees me working long hours. Yet, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I thrive on the challenges, relishing the moments when I can negotiate a complex deal or advocate for my client's interests. As I step out the door, I glance back at Megan, her presence radiating a sense of calm and strength. I trust her implicitly, having built a life together on a foundation of love, respect, and unwavering support. There's a sense of stability in our relationship that I've always cherished. We've navigated through the trials of parenthood, career changes, and the inevitable ups and downs of life, and through it all, we've remained a united front. Driving through the bustling streets toward my office, I can't help but reflect on how fortunate I am. The life we've built together feels like a dream come true. We have a comfortable home in a good neighborhood, our children attend excellent schools, and we often find time for family outings and date nights. Little moments that keep the spark alive between Megan and me. I'm reminded of the spontaneous weekend getaway we took last month, just the 2 of us, to celebrate our anniversary. We explored the coast, walked hand in hand on the beach, and lost ourselves in conversations that felt as fresh and exciting as they did in our early days together. Yet, as I navigate through the traffic, a subtle knot of anxiety begins to creep in, though I can't quite place its source. Is it just the pressures of work? Or perhaps the weight of responsibility that comes with providing for my family? I shake my head, dismissing the thought. I have faith in our life together. I trust in the bond that we've cultivated over the years, in the laughter we share, and in the way we understand one another without needing to say a word. As I arrive at the office, I take a deep breath, ready to embrace the day ahead. Little do I know that this sense of security and trust I've built will soon be put to the ultimate test, and the idyllic life I hold dear will be shaken in ways I could never have imagined. The first hint of unease crept into my life as silently as a shadow at dusk. It began subtly, an offhand comment from a colleague, a fleeting glance exchanged between Megan and a stranger at a gathering, the slight change in the tone of her laughter. Little did I know, these were the breadcrumbs leading me down a path I wished I could avoid. As the weeks went by, I started to notice small, almost imperceptible shifts in Megan's behavior. She became increasingly absorbed in her phone, tapping away at it with a frenetic energy that hadn't been there before. Even during dinner, I would catch her stealing glances at the screen, her brow furrowing slightly as if engaged in some serious conversation. At first, I brushed it off. She was busy with work, after all. But the more I observed, the more I felt a nagging suspicion worm its way into my mind. The evenings that we once spent together, curled up on the couch watching our favorite shows or sharing stories about our days, began to change. Megan would often excuse herself early, citing a need to prepare for an upcoming meeting or finish a presentation. I could see the flicker of distraction in her eyes, a preoccupation that left me feeling like a bystander in our own home. I'd try to initiate conversations about our day, about the kids, but she would respond with short, almost rehearsed answers as if she were more focused on what was happening outside our walls than within them. Then there were the late nights. It started with her claiming to have work events, networking dinners, or late-night project deadlines. Each time she left, a subtle pit formed in my stomach. Though I told myself it was just the pressures of her job. I didn't want to be the type of husband who questioned his wife's every move. Still, an inner voice whispered that something was amiss. There was an air of urgency in her movements, a secret she was carrying that I couldn't quite grasp. One evening, after putting the children to bed, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, the glow of the television reflecting off the walls, casting a faint light over my growing concerns. I picked up Megan's phone, intending to send her a quick message. As I scrolled through her apps, I noticed the messaging app open with a string of unread messages from a contact I didn't recognize. A wave of apprehension washed over me, but I fought against the urge to dive into her private life uninvited. I placed the phone back on the table, telling myself I was overreacting, that I was merely being paranoid. The next week, I attended a dinner party hosted by one of my partners of the firm. Megan had promised to come, but at the last minute, she excused herself, claiming an unexpected work commitment. I arrived at the event, trying to shake off the feeling of disappointment. I was excited to mingle with colleagues and unwind after a long week. Yet, the whole evening felt hollow without her by my side. As I engaged in conversations about new cases and legal victories, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife was a million miles away. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be her, apologizing for missing the evening. Instead, it was just work-related messages and the occasional text from friends. I couldn't help but glance at the door, hoping to see her walk in with that infectious smile that made my heart race. But as the night wore on, I realized that I was merely delaying the inevitable. I had to confront the growing distance between us. When I returned home that night, the house was quiet. The children were fast asleep, their peaceful faces a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in my mind. I found Megan sitting at the dining table, laptop open, papers strewn about. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, and for a moment, I simply watched her. There was a beauty in her focus, yet it felt like I was gazing at a stranger. I approached her, my heart racing, a mix of longing and uncertainty in my chest. "Megan?" I ventured, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're working late again?" She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes before it was replaced by that familiar warmth. "Oh, hey, I didn't hear you come in. Just trying to finish this presentation for tomorrow." I wanted to press her further, to ask about the messages, about her late nights, about the space that was slowly growing between us. But I hesitated, choosing instead to keep the peace. "Do you want me to help?" I offered, hoping to bridge the gap that had started to form. She shook her head with a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "No, it's okay. I've got it under control." There was something in her tone, a finality, that made my heart sink. The following days saw more of the same. Megan's phone habits continued to draw my attention. I would often catch her looking down at it during dinner, her expression shifting from joy to a fleeting tension. Each time I asked about her day, there was a hesitance in her voice, a pause that made me question whether she was being fully honest. It was then that the notion began to settle in my mind. I was losing her, or perhaps I had already lost her. The thought was unbearable, and it festered within me, growing heavier with each passing day. I tried to confront my feelings rationally. What if I was merely imagining things? What if I was projecting my insecurities onto her? But as the days turned into weeks, the weight of my suspicions felt undeniable. That Saturday, I decided to confront Megan. We had planned a family outing to the park, but as the children played on the swings, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. She was laughing and cheering them on, yet there was something in her eyes, a distance. A flicker of distraction that echoed the growing unease within me. "Megan," I said softly, pulling her aside while the kids were busy, "can we talk?" Her smile faltered slightly as she nodded, her expression shifting from joy to concern. "Of course, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, the words hovering on the tip of my tongue. "I've been feeling like you're a bit distant lately. Is everything okay?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the ground as if searching for the right words. "I'm just busy with work, Tom. You know how it is," she replied, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of something, an emotion I couldn't quite place. But something in her tone didn't sit right with me. I wanted to probe further, to dig deeper, but as I searched her face for the truth, I felt the wall between us growing thicker. The laughter of our children echoed in the background, and I realized how fragile our family dynamic had become. At that moment, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. Whatever was happening, whatever had shifted between us, it was real. And I was determined to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant confronting the uncomfortable truths I feared I might uncover. As we returned to the playful chaos of our kids, I couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of my once perfect life was beginning to crumble, and I was powerless to stop it. It was a typical Wednesday evening, the kind of day where the monotony of work bleeds into the comfort of home. The children were tucked into bed, their laughter still echoing in my ears as I headed to the kitchen to clean up the remnants of dinner. Megan had excused herself earlier, saying she needed to finish some work for a presentation, leaving me to tidy up the chaos that comes with family life. As I washed the dishes, my mind wandered to the recent changes in Megan's behavior. I replayed our conversations in my head, the odd glances, the hushed phone calls, and the growing distance between us. The nagging feeling that something was wrong had become a persistent itch, and I couldn't shake it off. I finished washing the last plate and wiped my hands on a towel, taking a moment to breathe deeply, trying to quell the anxiety rising within me. I decided to check my emails in the study, needing a distraction from the chaos of my thoughts. As I stepped into the room, I noticed Megan's laptop sitting open on the desk. A flicker of curiosity sparked within me, and against my better judgment, I moved closer. The screen lit up, revealing the login page, but it wasn't locked. I hesitated, the ethical part of my mind battling with the need to uncover the truth. "Just a quick look," I told myself, my heart racing. I entered her password, a combination of dates that held significance for us, and the desktop flooded with open windows. Among the countless tabs and documents, one folder caught my eye, labeled Photos. I clicked it, my heart pounding. The thumbnails appeared, revealing images of various family events. But as I scrolled down, my stomach dropped. There it was, a series of photos that made my blood run cold. Megan and a man I didn't recognize, their smiles wide and carefree, their bodies close together. The images depicted intimate moments. Megan leaning into the man's shoulder, their laughter frozen in time. I could feel my breath hitch as I clicked through, each picture more damning than the last. Then I saw it. One photo captured them in a secluded park, the sun setting behind them. Megan looked beautiful, her hair catching the light, but it was the way she was gazing at this man, Daniel, that pierced through me like a knife. A smile played on his lips, but it was his arm wrapped around her that shattered my world. I leaned against the desk, the room spinning as shock washed over me. My thoughts raced. How could this be happening? I felt as if the ground had been pulled from under my feet. Each photo felt like a betrayal, an invasion of my heart and soul. I thought of all the late nights, the moments when she had seemed distant, the conversations that had felt rehearsed. It all made sense now, but the realization only deepened the pain. How long had this been going on? I couldn't wrap my mind around the reality that the woman I loved, the mother of my children, had chosen to share these moments with another man. The weight of betrayal settled heavily in my chest, a crushing sensation that made it hard to breathe. Anger surged through me, raw and intense, mixed with the bitter taste of disbelief. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I was frozen, trapped in this moment of revelation. I quickly closed the laptop, my hands trembling as I tried to collect myself. I paced the room, wrestling with my emotions. The quietness of the house was suffocating, amplifying the chaos within me. I felt utterly alone, grappling with the sense that everything I had known was unraveling before my eyes. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the life we built together? The anger morphed into something more potent, an unquenchable thirst for revenge. I couldn't let this stand. If she thought she could carry on this charade without consequences, she was gravely mistaken. As dawn broke, illuminating the room with a soft glow, I felt a clarity settle over me. I wouldn't confront Megan directly. No, that would be too simple, too quick. I wanted her to feel the repercussions of her actions. And for that, I would need a plan. One that would dismantle the very foundation of her affair without revealing my knowledge of it. I spent the next few days obsessively crafting a strategy. I knew who the man was now, Daniel, a photographer whose work I'd seen in galleries. He had a reputation for being talented, yet somewhat naive when it came to the cutthroat world of art. My mind raced with ideas as I considered how I could use my legal expertise to ruin him without confrontation. In my role as a corporate lawyer, I had access to vast networks of contacts. I could manipulate contracts, twist the narrative, and play the game to my advantage. The thought sent a thrill through me. I began to research his career, his past exhibitions, and the contracts he had signed. There were always loopholes, always a way to manipulate the system in my favor. I could make his life unbearable, stripping him of his credibility and connections, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. One evening, as I sat in my office, I began drafting emails to some influential art curators and gallery owners I had worked with in the past. I composed them carefully, crafting a narrative that would lead them to doubt Daniel's professionalism, sowing seeds of mistrust about his character. I would position him as unreliable, a liability to any gallery looking to promote an emerging artist. As I worked, I could feel a sense of empowerment coursing through me. It was a dark pleasure, a vindication that began to dull the raw pain of betrayal. I could destroy Daniel's reputation, leaving him without opportunities or connections, all while keeping my hands clean. I wouldn't have to confront Megan directly. I could let the repercussions of her choices play out without her knowing I was the architect of her lover's demise. My internal monologue spiraled further. It felt justifiable, even righteous, to act in this way. After all, she had brought this upon herself. I envisioned the moment when Daniel would realize that his career was crumbling beneath him. How he would search for answers but find none. The irony of it all ignited a dark sense of satisfaction within me. I would be the unseen hand, pulling the strings of fate, orchestrating the downfall of the man who had dared to encroach upon my life. With each email I sent, with every contract I manipulated, I felt a weight lift. This plan was my lifeline, my way to reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. I was no longer just the betrayed husband, I was the puppet master. Weaving a web of revenge that would ensnare both Megan and Daniel. As I executed my plan, the reality of my actions began to settle in. I would be crossing a line, delving into a darkness that could consume me. Yet, I felt justified in my pursuit. It was about survival. I was fighting for my life, my family, and my dignity. I steeled myself for the journey ahead, determined to see it through to the bitter end. As the days turned into a blur of focused determination, I immersed myself in the legal intricacies surrounding intellectual property and contract law. The more I delved into the labyrinthine world of copyright, the clearer my path became. I had always been adept at navigating the legal landscape, but this time it felt personal, almost primal. I had a target in mind, and I was committed to dismantling it piece by piece. I began my research by revisiting Daniel's previous contracts and agreements. Thankfully, the art world was rife with publicly available documents. Artists often shared their contracts as part of their portfolios, seeking transparency and guidance from the community. With my background, I understood how to analyze these documents not just for content, but for potential vulnerabilities. I could see where loopholes existed, where rights could be twisted, and where Daniel had inadvertently left gaps for exploitation. Sitting in my office, surrounded by stacks of legal textbooks and notes, I felt the rush of adrenaline coursing through me. The goal was simple: strip Daniel of the rights to his most acclaimed works. I scoured every contract he had signed, searching for any clauses that could be manipulated or reinterpreted. I focused on his exhibition agreements, where ownership of artworks was often tangled in fine print. It was all about timing, leveraging the right clauses at the right moment. One particular contract caught my eye: a partnership agreement between Daniel and a prominent gallery. I noticed a clause that stipulated the gallery would retain rights to any work showcased under their roof, provided certain conditions were met. Daniel had been underestimating how these details could come back to haunt him. I meticulously crafted a strategy to leverage this clause, ensuring the gallery had no choice but to follow the terms, while Daniel would find himself on the outside looking in. Next, I turned my attention to copyright registration. Daniel had submitted several pieces for copyright protection, a standard practice for artists. But there was an element I could exploit. I researched the procedures and discovered a method to challenge the registration of his works based on technicalities, an oversight in the documentation process that could invalidate his claims to ownership. It would require precise execution and a good amount of legal maneuvering, but I was prepared to invest the time and energy. The thrill of this intellectual chess match exhilarated me. I created a meticulous timeline of actions, detailing every step I would take to initiate my plan. I identified the legal channels I needed to navigate, potential allies in the legal field who could assist with the intricacies, and the methods I would employ to ensure Daniel's reputation would begin to crumble under the weight of his failures. As I pieced together my approach, I could feel my resolve hardening. The act of dismantling his career became a project I poured my energy into as if it were a complex case rather than a personal vendetta. I drafted legal documents that would invoke clauses from various contracts, cleverly phrasing them to apply pressure where it hurt most. Each word was carefully chosen to set the wheels in motion, ensuring that Daniel's every misstep would echo loudly in the art community. With my strategy solidified and a series of documents ready to deploy, it was time to set my plan in motion. I felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation as I prepared to unleash the first wave of my orchestrated destruction. The art world was small, and news spread like wildfire. If I played my cards right, Daniel would soon find himself mired in complications that he would struggle to escape. The first step involved sending a formal inquiry to the gallery that represented Daniel, the same one linked to that pivotal contract I had analyzed. I crafted a letter that hinted at potential breaches in their agreement, raising questions about the ownership of his showcased pieces. I carefully cited the relevant clauses, framing them as a protective measure for the gallery while simultaneously sowing seeds of doubt about Daniel's reliability. "Dear gallery director," I began, adopting an air of professionalism, "I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to bring to your attention a matter of potential concern regarding the exhibition agreements for Daniel, last name, S. works. Upon reviewing the contract, I noticed some discrepancies that may warrant further examination. I sent the letter, knowing it would initiate a chain reaction. I could envision the gallery's staff huddled together, discussing the implications of my inquiry, and I relished the thought. With their interest piqued, I knew they would scrutinize Daniel's contributions more closely, and any hint of doubt would leave him vulnerable. Next, I turned my attention to Daniel's copyright registrations. I prepared a challenge against his most successful works, alleging minor discrepancies in the paperwork that could potentially nullify his claims. I filled out the necessary forms, carefully laid out my argument and submitted them to the Copyright Office with a veneer of professionalism. Each document was crafted to sound legitimate and credible, ensuring that the authorities would take my claims seriously. In parallel, I reached out to a few trusted colleagues in the legal field, planting the seeds of doubt about Daniel's character and work ethic. I described my concerns regarding his contractual obligations and hinted at the vulnerabilities I had discovered. "It's unfortunate, really," I would say casually, "but I can't help but wonder if Daniel has the best interests of the gallery at heart, especially with the stakes so high." The conversations flowed smoothly, with whispers of doubt hanging in the air. As the first phase of my plan unfurled, I felt a sense of power surging within me. The once constant thrum of anxiety had morphed into an exhilarating rush. I envisioned the scene unfolding, Daniel receiving the inquiries, the challenges to his works, and the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. He had crossed a line by becoming involved with my wife, and now he would pay the price. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout began to ripple through the art community. I monitored Daniel's social media, watching for signs of distress. The gallery's hesitation to endorse his work became evident, and I savored every post filled with ambiguity about upcoming exhibitions. With each passing day, I reveled in the knowledge that I was tightening the noose around his career. The thrill of orchestrating this downfall kept me awake at night, fueled by a sense of justice for my own shattered life. My relationship with Megan remained tense, but I buried my emotions beneath the excitement of my plan. I wanted her to feel the tremors of her choice as Daniel's life unraveled around him. I became adept at compartmentalizing my feelings, putting on a facade of normalcy during our interactions. Each time she asked about my day, I feigned ignorance, but inside, I was reveling in the chaos I had set into motion. As the weeks progressed, I could feel the tides turning. Daniel's career was slowly slipping through his fingers, and the taste of victory was within reach. I began to strategize my next moves, carefully plotting how I could further entrench myself in this battle. The art world was unforgiving, and I was determined to ensure that Daniel would learn just how much damage could be wrought by a determined adversary. With every decision I made, I felt empowered, and the thrill of revenge became intoxicating. I was no longer just a man betrayed, I was a force to be reckoned with, ready to unleash the full weight of my legal expertise on anyone who dared to cross my path. The plan was working, and I was exhilarated by the control I had taken over a situation that had once felt so helpless. I had found my purpose, and I was ready to see it through to the bitter end. As the weeks progressed, the tremors of my actions rippled through Daniel's world. Initially, he seemed oblivious, caught in the romantic haze of his affair with Megan, perhaps even riding high on the illusion of success. However, the undercurrents of turmoil soon began to surface, crashing upon him like waves on a rocky shore. Daniel's first blow came unexpectedly. A gallery that had showcased his work for years sent him an abrupt email, notifying him of their decision to pull his pieces from the upcoming exhibition. "We appreciate your contributions, Daniel," it read, "but due to recent developments regarding your contracts, we've opted to re-evaluate our partnership." The tone was professional, but the implications were devastating. I could only imagine his confusion as he read the words, feeling the ground shift beneath him. He was an artist with a burgeoning career. How could this happen? As the news spread among his peers, Daniel's phone buzzed with calls and messages, most of them from concerned friends and colleagues. He found himself engulfed in a fog of uncertainty. "What are you talking about?" he would exclaim, bewildered. "I haven't done anything wrong." But with each conversation, the questions about his professional integrity mounted. Accusations whispered among gallery owners and curators spread like wildfire, chipping away at his reputation. His social media accounts, once filled with praise and engagement, began to shift. Comments that once celebrated his artistic vision transformed into inquiries about his reliability and professionalism. The sting of public scrutiny grew sharper with every post. He found himself staring at the screen in disbelief, grappling with the realization that the art world was turning its back on him. What had he done to deserve this? Where was the support he had always relied upon? As Daniel attempted to salvage his standing, he reached out to other galleries, seeking opportunities that had once seemed plentiful. But every inquiry met with silence, every application returned unanswered. The bright prospects that had once been a constant in his life now felt like a cruel joke. Each rejection deepened his despair, and the panic began to bubble beneath the surface. "What is going on?" he muttered to himself late one night, pacing his studio. The walls, once a sanctuary filled with his creations, now felt like a prison. The light dimmed as he realized he was losing his grasp on everything he had worked so hard to achieve. His canvases, once vibrant and alive with color, seemed to mock him with their stillness. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, a feeling he had never experienced before. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's frustration morphed into desperation. He found himself questioning everything: his talent, his choices, and ultimately, his worth as an artist. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," he whispered into the quiet of his empty studio, his heart heavy with self-doubt. The crushing weight of his situation clouded his thoughts, and he could no longer discern the path forward. He turned to Megan, seeking solace in their relationship, but the once exhilarating connection felt strained and distant. "We'll figure this out together," she would assure him, but even her words rang hollow to his ears. The reality was undeniable: he was losing everything, and the bond they shared could not shield him from the storm brewing around them. Daniel's world was collapsing, and he felt like a marionette whose strings had been cut, spiraling into chaos. As his exhibitions vanished and opportunities slipped through his fingers, he began to realize the full extent of the disaster unfolding before him. The anguish of loss turned into a fervent need for answers, igniting a flame of determination within him. He wouldn't let this happen without a fight. Meanwhile, across town, Megan found herself in a whirlwind of confusion and turmoil. What had begun as a passionate escape into a world of art and romance was crumbling around her. She watched helplessly as Daniel's situation deteriorated, feeling a gnawing sense of dread creeping into her heart. The fantasies she had woven in her mind began to unravel, thread by delicate thread. In the beginning, her relationship with Daniel felt intoxicating, an exhilarating affair that offered a thrilling contrast to her stable but stagnant life with Tom. The allure of being desired by an artist was overwhelming, filling her with a sense of vitality and freedom. But as the reality of Daniel's failing career seeped in, those feelings of empowerment began to dissipate. With each passing day, the cracks in their relationship grew wider. Megan noticed Daniel becoming increasingly withdrawn, the vibrant spark in his eyes fading into shadows of doubt and frustration. The conversations that once flowed effortlessly turned awkward and strained, filled with unspoken anxieties that loomed over them like dark clouds. He would stare blankly into space, lost in his thoughts, while she grappled with the gnawing fear that their love was slipping away. "Are you okay?" she would ask, her voice tinged with concern. But Daniel's responses became curt, his smile faded, and the warmth that had once enveloped them was replaced with an uncomfortable chill. Megan began to sense the fragility of their dreams, the illusion of a future together slowly dissolving like mist in the morning sun. In her quieter moments, when the weight of her decisions pressed heavily upon her, she found herself questioning everything. Was this what she had wanted? Was she truly ready to leave behind the life she had built with Tom for the uncertain future with Daniel? She recalled the happiness of her family, the laughter of her children, the comfort of shared routines, and wondered if she had been too quick to cast it aside. As she grappled with her emotions, she found herself drifting further from Tom, who was oblivious to the growing chasm between them. Their conversations felt stilted and forced, filled with polite exchanges that lacked the intimacy they once shared. Tom was focused, determined, and even somewhat distant, but his preoccupation went unnoticed by her until it became painfully evident. The tension between them became palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the fracture that had taken root. Megan's heart sank as she watched Daniel struggle to regain his footing in the art world. She had envisioned a life filled with passion, creativity, and adventure, yet it felt like those dreams were evaporating before her eyes. The thought of being part of a tumultuous relationship, one built on instability and heartache, began to weigh heavily on her. One evening, sitting alone in her living room, she felt the full force of her choices crashing down around her. The glimmer of excitement that had once ignited her spirit felt like a cruel mirage, and she found herself filled with regret. She had chased after a dream, only to realize it was built on shaky ground. Daniel's fall from grace reflected her disillusionment. She had traded one life for another, only to find herself on the precipice of disaster. Tears filled her eyes as she faced the harsh truth. Her affair had not only jeopardized her marriage but had also brought chaos into her life. The euphoria of forbidden love had dulled, leaving behind the stark reality of what she had sacrificed. As she sat in silence, the weight of her actions pressed down like a heavy cloak, suffocating her spirit. She had longed for freedom, yet it felt more like a prison, a suffocating reminder of the life she had left behind. With each passing day, as Daniel's struggles intensified, so did her own. She began to see the fragility of the dreams she had built, recognizing that the fairy tale she had envisioned was nothing more than a mirage. And as she stood at the crossroads, torn between two worlds, she understood that the reality of her choices would soon demand a reckoning. The paths ahead were fraught with uncertainty, and the echoes of her past began to reverberate louder, haunting her with the consequences of her decisions. In the twilight of her affair, Megan felt a growing sense of dread settle within her. As Daniel's world spiraled into chaos, she feared that her happiness would become collateral damage in a game she never intended to play. The facade of freedom she had chased was crumbling, and with it, her heart began to falter as she faced the stark truth of her desires and the reality of her life. Days turned into weeks, and as I observed Megan's behavior, a creeping sense of dread settled within me. She was different, more distant, her laughter less frequent, her smiles strained. It was as if an invisible wall had risen between us, and I found myself questioning everything. The once warm and comfortable atmosphere of our home had transformed into a place filled with silence and unspoken words. One evening, I returned from the office later than usual, exhausted from a long day of negotiations and contracts. I expected to find Megan curled up with a book or lost in her thoughts, but instead, I found her staring blankly out the window. The city lights sparkled like stars, but the beauty of the scene was lost on me as I approached her. "Megan?" I called softly, my heart racing. "What's wrong?" She turned to me, her eyes wide, searching for something, answers, perhaps. "I've been thinking about Daniel," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My stomach twisted at the mention of his name. The artist who had taken my wife's attention, the man I believed was the cause of our crumbling marriage. "What about him?" I asked, attempting to keep my tone neutral. "He's struggling," she replied, her voice tinged with concern. "It feels like something is going on, and I can't shake the feeling that someone is trying to undermine him." The knot in my stomach tightened. Was she beginning to suspect me? I knew the implications of my actions were dangerous, and now they might be turning against me. "Megan, you can't be serious. Daniel's problems are his own. He needs to figure it out." But inside, I was spiraling. I had orchestrated this plan, weaving a web of manipulation to destroy Daniel without revealing my hand. Now, the very idea that she could connect the dots made my pulse race. I had set this all in motion to reclaim her, yet I could feel the ground slipping beneath my feet. Her expression hardened, and I could see the resolve building within her. "Tom, you've been acting so strange. I can't help but feel that there's more to this. Are you sure you have nothing to do with it?" Panic coursed through me as I realized she was on the brink of the truth. "You need to trust me," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm only looking out for you." Her eyes searched mine, looking for sincerity. "But at what cost? I feel like I'm losing you, and it's all because of him." Her frustration boiled over, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her facade. The conflict roiled inside me. A tempest of guilt and anger. The person I loved was slipping away, and I was the one pushing her towards Daniel. In my quest for revenge, I had forgotten the most important thing, the love we once shared. But could I turn back now? The days that followed our confrontation felt surreal, like walking through a dream where everything was out of focus. Megan's anger simmered beneath the surface, and every interaction between us was laced with tension. I felt her pulling away, and with each passing moment, the walls I had built to protect myself began to crumble. Megan's growing suspicion lingered like a storm cloud over our heads. The love that had once flourished between us now felt fragile, like a glass vase teetering on the edge of a shelf. I couldn't help but feel a deepening fear that she might uncover the truth about my manipulation of Daniel's career. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence was deafening. I could feel the weight of her gaze, piercing through me. "Tom, I need to know what's going on," she finally said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Why do I feel like everything around us is collapsing?" I opened my mouth, my heart racing, but words failed me. How could I explain the tangled web I had spun in my quest for revenge without revealing the darkness within me? Instead, I opted for deflection. "Maybe you're overthinking things. It's just a rough patch, Megan. We'll get through it." But she shook her head, frustration flaring in her eyes. "This isn't just a rough patch, Tom. Daniel's life is unraveling, and I can't ignore the fact that he's not the only one suffering. This is about us, too." The realization struck me like a slap to the face. In my pursuit to punish Daniel, I had inadvertently placed our marriage on the chopping block. "I never wanted it to come to this," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was protecting us." "Protecting us?" she echoed, incredulous. "You've destroyed someone's life, and in the process, you've almost destroyed ours. I can't live like this, Tom." As her words settled into my mind, I felt the full weight of my actions crashing down on me. I had embarked on a path of revenge, convinced that I was righting a wrong, yet here I was, standing on the brink of losing everything. The love of my life was slipping through my fingers, and I was powerless to stop it. At that moment, I made a choice. I would come clean. I had to let her know how deep the rabbit hole went. "Megan, I need you to understand, there are things you don't know. Things that led me to do what I did." Her expression hardened, skepticism flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I've been manipulating contracts. I thought if I could just get Daniel out of the picture, you'd see how much I love you." The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with the realization of my betrayal. I watched her face drain of color as the implications sank in. You did this? She whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't want to hurt you, I pleaded, desperation seeping into my tone. But I was afraid of losing you. I thought I was protecting our future. Her reaction was immediate, a mixture of horror and disbelief. You thought hurting someone else would protect me? Tom, how could you? I thought it would make you see that I'm the one who deserves you, I said, but even I could hear how feeble my arguments were. The truth was out, and the fallout was immediate. I had lost her trust, perhaps irreparably. I don't know who you are anymore, she said, her voice breaking. How can I stay in a marriage built on deceit? The weight of her words hit me like a physical blow, and in that moment, I realized the true cost of my actions. I had not only hurt Daniel, but I had also shattered the very foundation of the love I had sought to protect. Megan stood up, her face pale as she turned away from me, the realization of what I had done settling like a leaden weight in the pit of my stomach. I can't do this anymore, Tom, she said, her voice trembling. I need to find my way. This isn't who I am. As she walked out of the room, I felt an ache of despair that I had never known before. I had tried to control the narrative, to manipulate the circumstances to my advantage, but in doing so, I had lost everything that mattered. The dreams I had fought to reclaim now lay in ruins, and I was left standing among the ashes of my own making.